Now, to kick the night off, we have The Right to Repair, written and spoken by one Patrick Hayden, a topical talk that speaks of rampant consumerism and how monopolizing companies encourage it. You might own less of your phone than you think.
You don't own this. Okay, I think that's pretty clear. This is my phone. But what I mean to say is that you all don't own your own phones. Okay, let's step back a bit and clarify even more. Because you own your own phone, right? Well, not exactly. Of course you own the precious sandwich of metal, silicon, and hardware that makes it up. But when it comes to what makes it tick, what makes it work as a phone, you very much don't. The software you run on it is graciously granted to you by the manufacturer, and without it, you'd have a very expensive paperweight in your pocket right now. But why am I up here talking about a legal technicality that has most likely never affected anyone here or ever will? Because it has, and it's part of a host of sneaky tactics used by manufacturers of all shapes and sizes to ensure that our devices have their expiration dates hardwired into them. You see, it's also a pillar of society as well, and has been part of the Western world for decades. That's foreshadowing. And this principle is more commonly known as planned obsolescence, a term that you might see come up as well. I think it's also worth moving on to, though, now, why I'm so personally invested in this as well. You see, I remember being told by my parents that when I was younger, I'd have a strange habit of finding myself behind the old Sony CRT TV. You know those massive ones that used to be needing 2 people to carry it, and to be honest, if you used it the wrong way, you could probably sink a small warship. Yeah, those ones. Anyway, they tell me about how they'd have to hoist me out of the back, playing with wires and cables, because if they left me any longer, I could have electrocuted myself, or worse, broken the TV. Things only went from there, though, to be completely honest. It went from a failed lobotomy on our family's toaster, R.I.P. Russell Hobbs 4-slicer in satin grey, you will be missed, to taking apart my dad's old laptop and hoping, praying silently it would work when I put it back together. You see, something I really liked about that old laptop was the fact that when you took it apart, it felt like it was helping you along the way. With that in mind, as new stuff entered the house, I was even more excited to figure out how it worked, and even more fun to take it apart. However, as I learned, this newer stuff wasn't designed to be taken apart, at least by anything less than a trained professional. While the older stuff felt like you were getting a helping hand from the company, this newer stuff really felt like an old teacher of mine, I won't name for obvious reasons, virtually mocking me for not understanding what was going on. After that, I realized this wasn't some industry-wide mistake being made. It was a conscious choice to make things unrepairable and to further the grave of so many good devices. Now, as I mentioned earlier, and as I'll be going back to now, this isn't strange for the system all of this resides in, though. As I mentioned earlier, it's sadly a symptom of our version of capitalism, driven by a need for progressive and unrelenting growth at all costs. I know. That might seem a lot to drop in what's essentially a thinly veiled criticism piece on modern technology, but it's so tightly integrated into the issue at hand, I can't not mention it. How can a system that perpetuates the constant purchase of new products possibly be compatible with sustainable technology production if it's driven by nothing but profit? Oh, that was a lot of P's. Anyway, what I need to get onto now is, I really hope it is, otherwise we are headed on a one-way slip and slide to a Mad Max scenario in which the remainder of humanity are fighting over the last scraps in the local derelict super value for the last Magnum ice cream 4-pack. My serious answer to this, though, is no. Some might not even blame the companies themselves. The progression of increasingly smaller, efficient, and powerful hardware requires that tighter consolidation of hardware, meaning that repairability is really difficult to implement. In fact, virtually impossible. Completely rubbish. If a relatively small Dutch phone maker can make a product that embodies all of these factors, so can everyone's favorite trillion-dollar fruit-based computer company, Apple. Now, I say all this with an air of concern for the future. And with these newer products, you have to think about our impact, because as much as I like to think about the product we have in our hands right now, think about the other side of this, the genesis of it. Imagine the people that had to work in factories where there are nets outside the window to stop them from jumping out. Imagine where there's chemicals and materials being mined in countries where warlords overlook the people. Imagine where there's chemicals being pumped into oceans, trees being cut down to write endless amounts of advertising material, and enough plastic being churned out to choke this planet. When you see all that, it really puts everything into perspective. Sure, I'm still allowed to be annoyed that I can't repair my dad's new laptop, but it really does make you think. Now, at the end of it all, we really have to look at our own behavior, which is that of a system moving forward where we don't have any control and it steamrolls ahead, crushing anything in its path and anyone unfortunate enough to be working underneath it. So I think it's worth mentioning that no one in this room, anyone, even the people working for these companies, don't want these sort of violations. But it developed as a result for our hunger of new devices. So if I'm going to say anything to all of you here tonight, it's this. Don't upgrade your phone this year. Skip it. It's really not worth it. Thank you.